What if I told you the slowdown everyone keeps dismissing isn't just coming? It's already here. From empty storefronts in once busy towns to record debt weighing on families, the warning signs are flashing all around us. Yet politicians and media keep insisting the economy is strong. The truth is, cracks are widening beneath the surface, and ignoring them won't make them disappear. In this video, we'll uncover 10 powerful reasons Richard Wolff warned us about, reasons that explain why the slowdown is unfolding now and why it could reshape your future faster than you think. Number one, rising household debt. When economists talk about a slowdown, one of the first warning signs they point to is household debt. Over the past 2 decades, American families have been borrowing more and saving less, leaving them vulnerable to shock. From credit cards and student loans to auto payments and mortgages, the numbers are staggering. The average U.S. household now carries thousands of dollars in high-interest credit card balances, with interest rates climbing above 20%. That means people are paying more just to stand still, which leaves less money for essentials like groceries, healthcare, or rent. This heavy financial burden creates a ripple effect, because when families cut back, businesses feel the squeeze, and the broader economy slows down. Rising debt is not just a number on a spreadsheet. It represents stress at the kitchen table and uncertainty about the future. The impact becomes even clearer when you look at how spending habits shift under the weight of debt. Instead of investing in education, starting a small business, or buying a first home, families delay major life decisions. Young people, already struggling with tuition loans, find themselves trapped in a cycle where paychecks barely cover minimum payments. Middle-class households, once seen as the backbone of economic growth, are now forced to choose between paying off old debt or taking on new loans for emergencies. This is why consumer demand, which makes up nearly 70% of the U.S. economy, is slowing down. When the majority of income is diverted to debt servicing, growth stalls. The slowdown is not an abstract idea. It is happening in shopping malls, car dealerships, and local restaurants where fewer dollars are being spent. Another sign of strain is the growth of alternative lending markets. Payday loans, buy now, pay later schemes, and cash advance apps have exploded in popularity. They offer short-term relief, but often trap people in even deeper financial holes. Economists warn that these products are symptoms of a system under stress, where traditional wages no longer keep pace with the cost of living. Rising debt reflects a deeper imbalance. Workers face stagnant earnings while prices climb, leaving borrowing as the only option. But borrowing cannot go on forever. At some point, households hit a ceiling, and when they do, the entire economy feels the slowdown. This makes rising household debt one of the most visible and dangerous reasons why the slowdown is not only coming, it is already here. Number two, stagnant wages. Another powerful reason behind the current slowdown is stagnant wages. For decades, the cost of living has climbed steadily, yet wages for most workers have barely budged when adjusted for inflation. On paper, salaries might look higher than they were 20 years ago, but the reality is that each dollar buys less. Rising rent, healthcare, and education costs eat away at incomes, leaving households with little to save or spend freely. Economists often call wages the fuel of the economy, because when workers earn more, they spend more, boosting businesses and creating growth. But when wages remain flat while expenses rise, the fuel runs out and growth stalls. Families who once lived comfortably on one paycheck now struggle to make ends meet with two, showing how much economic pressure has built up over time. The deeper issue lies in how wage stagnation reshapes society. Younger generations are particularly affected, as many enter the workforce with high student debt but without meaningful salary growth. This limits their ability to buy homes, invest in retirement, or start families, creating a ripple effect that slows down entire industries tied to those life milestones. Construction companies build fewer homes, car dealers sell fewer vehicles, and local businesses see fewer customers. Even middle-aged workers feel squeezed as they juggle supporting children while caring for aging parents, all without significant wage increases. The gap between what people earn and what they need to spend grows wider each year, creating a sense of frustration and insecurity that feeds into broader economic instability. When people feel financially stuck, they stop taking risks, which reduces innovation and investment in the economy as a whole. This wage stagnation also highlights the growing divide between workers and corporations. While productivity has risen dramatically since the 1970s, the gains have not been shared equally. A large share of profits goes to shareholders and executives, leaving workers behind. This imbalance creates resentment but also weakens economic momentum because consumer spending is the largest driver of growth. Without rising wages, that driver sputters. Stagnant wages are not just a paycheck problem, they are a national growth problem. They show that the system is tilted in a way that drains the energy from the economy and leaves millions struggling to stay afloat. This reality makes stagnant wages one of the clearest signs that the slowdown is not on the horizon. It has already taken hold. Number 3, rising household debt. Another factor dragging the economy into slowdown is the mountain of household debt. Across the United States, families are carrying record levels of mortgages, credit card balances, auto loans, and student loans. What makes this especially dangerous is that debt has grown much faster than income. Many households now rely on borrowing simply to cover everyday expenses like groceries or utility bills, not just major purchases. Credit cards, once a tool for emergencies or convenience, have become lifelines, with interest rates climbing above 20%. This creates a cycle where people borrow more to stay afloat, only to fall deeper into debt as interest piles up. When large numbers of families are trapped in this cycle, it limits their ability to spend, invest, and plan for the future, pushing the broader economy into a slowdown. The impact of household debt goes beyond personal stress. It affects entire industries. Housing markets, for example, slow down when people cannot afford new mortgages or are buried under existing ones. Car sales fall when buyers cannot take on new loans. And small businesses suffer when consumers cut back on spending to keep up with credit card payments. High levels of student debt delay homeownership, entrepreneurship, and even family formation, all of which are engines of long-term growth. This burden is particularly heavy on younger generations, who often graduate into a weak job market while owing tens of thousands of dollars. Instead of fueling growth, their earnings go straight into debt repayment, removing billions from the economy each year that could have been used to expand businesses and create jobs. What makes rising household debt even more alarming is its fragility in the face of economic shock. When interest rates rise, as they have recently, the cost of servicing debt climbs sharply, leaving families with even less disposable income. A sudden job loss or medical emergency can push already stretched households into default or bankruptcy. And when defaults rise, banks and lenders pull back, tightening credit across the economy. This reduces access to loans for businesses and consumers alike, creating a downward spiral of reduced spending and slowed growth. Household debt, once seen as a driver of prosperity, now acts as a heavy anchor, pulling the economy down. It shows clearly how fragile the system has become and why the slowdown is not just possible, but inevitable. Number 4, weak wage growth. One of the most telling signs of a slowdown is the persistence of weak wage growth. For decades now, wages for the majority of workers have barely moved when adjusted for inflation. While the cost of living has soared, paychecks have failed to keep up, leaving millions of households struggling to make ends meet. This gap between rising expenses and stagnant incomes means that even when jobs are available, they don't provide enough purchasing power to sustain healthy consumer demand. Without robust wages, people cut back on spending, which in turn slows down businesses, reduces hiring, and ultimately drags the economy into a cycle of stagnation. A society cannot thrive when its workers are locked into paychecks that buy less and less each year. The imbalance is most evident when comparing worker productivity to compensation. Over the past 40 years, productivity has grown significantly, meaning workers are producing more value than ever before. Yet their wages have not risen in proportion. Instead, the bulk of the gains have gone to executives, shareholders, and the financial elite. This disconnect fuels growing inequality, where a small percentage of the population accumulates massive wealth while the majority remains stuck in financial insecurity. Weak wage growth also translates into weaker savings, fewer investments, and limited opportunities for upward mobility. For young workers, it often means remaining in cycles of debt or delaying milestones, like buying a home or starting a family. For older workers, it means entering retirement with inadequate savings and increased dependence on government programs. At a macroeconomic level, weak wages undermine one of the most important engines of growth, consumer spending. When households can't afford discretionary purchases, industries like retail, travel, dining, and entertainment suffer immediate setbacks. Over time, this reduction in demand spreads across the entire economy, leading to fewer jobs and slower growth. Policymakers often attempt to stimulate spending through credit expansion or government programs, but without stronger wages, these are only temporary fixes. What the current slowdown reveals is a deeper structural problem, an economy where productivity is rising, corporate profits are soaring, but ordinary workers are excluded from the benefits. Until wage growth catches up to the real cost of living, the cycle of economic stagnation will persist, dragging the nation into deeper financial stress. Number 5, rising consumer debt. Another powerful warning sign of an economic slowdown is the surge in consumer debt. When wages stagnate but the cost of living continues to climb, many households turn to credit cards, personal loans, and buy now, pay later schemes to fill the gap. While this might provide short-term relief, it creates a fragile foundation for the economy. Debt-fueled spending can only last so long before repayment burdens become overwhelming. Currently, household debt in the United States has reached record levels, with credit card balances crossing $1 trillion for the first time. This is not a mark of prosperity. It is a reflection of desperation. People are using borrowed money not for luxuries, but for basic necessities such as groceries, rent, and healthcare. The problem is further amplified by rising interest rates, which make debt more expensive to maintain. Every rate hike means consumers must spend more of their income servicing existing loans, leaving less money for other purchases. When millions of households are in this position, demand for goods and services across the economy shrinks. Businesses begin to see declining sales, which leads to layoffs, reduced investment, and slower growth. The burden of debt also traps families in cycles of financial stress, making it difficult to save for emergencies or invest in long-term goals. This insecurity ripples outward, undermining confidence in the economy and fueling the very slowdown it is supposed to offset. In this way, rising consumer debt doesn't just affect individuals, it becomes a systemic problem. History offers clear lessons about the dangers of excessive debt. Before the financial crisis of 2008, easy credit and skyrocketing borrowing masked underlying weaknesses in the economy. When the bubble burst, the collapse was devastating. Today, while conditions are different, the pattern is alarmingly familiar. Households are once again relying on debt to maintain living standards, even as their real incomes fail to keep up, unless there is meaningful wage growth or a dramatic drop in living costs. Debt levels will continue to rise, making the slowdown harsher when repayments become unsustainable. Consumer debt may be invisible to those at the top, but it is an everyday reality for millions of families, and it is one of the clearest indicators that the current system is stretched to its breaking point. Number 6, weak business investment. Another reason the slowdown is becoming unavoidable is the decline in business investment. Investment is the lifeblood of long-term growth. It's what allows companies to expand, hire more workers, and innovate. But when businesses become uncertain about the future, they pull back. Right now, many firms are facing rising borrowing costs due to higher interest rates, shrinking consumer demand because of inflation, and growing fears of geopolitical instability. Instead of taking risks on new factories, technologies, or research projects, they are cutting costs and holding on to cash. This creates a vicious cycle. With fewer investments, fewer jobs are created, productivity stalls, and the economy loses momentum. The slowdown feeds on itself, leaving workers, families, and entire industries vulnerable. The data makes this trend undeniable. Over the past several quarters, growth in non-residential fixed investment, a key measure of business spending, has weakened significantly. Small businesses, often described as the backbone of the economy, are especially hard hit. Surveys show that many of them are delaying expansion plans or even downsizing operations because of higher costs and tighter access to credit. Large corporations, meanwhile, are spending more money on stock buybacks and executive bonuses than on building plants or raising worker wages. This shift reflects a short-term focus on boosting shareholder value rather than securing long-term economic health. When businesses act this way, the broader economy loses its capacity to generate sustainable growth, and ordinary workers pay the price through reduced opportunities. History again provides warnings. During previous downturns, such as the Great Recession, a collapse in investment accelerated the economic pain, making recovery harder and slower. Today, the warning signs are similar. but the stakes are even higher. With global competition from countries like China and India intensifying, the United States cannot afford to lag behind in innovation and infrastructure. Yet the slowdown in investment is leaving entire sectors less prepared for the future. Weak investment today means fewer breakthroughs tomorrow, fewer high-paying jobs, and slower progress on solving pressing challenges like clean energy and modern transportation. Put simply, when businesses hesitate, the economy stagnates. Weak investment isn't just a statistic. It's a flashing red light that the slowdown is already here, shaping the opportunities, wages, and living standards of millions. Number 7, mounting household debt. One of the clearest signals of an economic slowdown is the rise of household debt. For many families, credit cards, auto loans, and student loans have become lifelines just to get by. But lifelines can quickly turn into chains. Right now, U.S. household debt has climbed to record highs, surpassing levels seen even before the 2008 financial crisis. Interest rates are higher, which means borrowing costs more than it did just a few years ago. Families who once managed their budgets comfortably are now struggling to keep up with mortgage payments, rent, and basic necessities. When households are drowning in debt, their ability to spend the very spending that keeps the economy moving shrinks dramatically. This is why debt at today's levels isn't just a private burden, it's a public warning sign that growth is faltering. The cracks are already visible. Credit card delinquencies have been climbing steadily, especially among younger Americans and lower-income households. Auto loan defaults are also on the rise, with repossessions increasing across the country. Student debt, despite pauses and partial forgiveness attempts, remains a massive weight on millions of people entering the workforce. These pressures reduce consumer confidence, making people more cautious about major purchases like homes or cars. That caution, multiplied across millions of households, translates into reduced demand, which directly slows down economic activity. Debt isn't just numbers on a balance sheet. It represents anxiety, hesitation, and financial fragility among ordinary people who are the foundation of economic growth. This isn't the first time mounting debt has spelled trouble. Before the Great Recession, soaring household borrowing masked underlying weaknesses until the crash exposed them. Today, the story feels hauntingly familiar. Wages have not kept pace with the cost of living, pushing people to lean on credit cards and loans as survival tools. But as interest payments eat up a larger share of income, households find themselves with less money to spend on goods and services. That reduced spending slows business revenues, which then prompts layoffs and hiring freezes. It's a domino effect, one that starts with families and ripples outward into the broader economy. Mounting household debt is not just a personal financial issue. It's one of the strongest indicators that the slowdown is no longer coming. It's already here. Number 8, declining global trade. Another major reason the slowdown is impossible to ignore is the sharp decline in global trade. For decades, trade has been one of the engines of growth for the United States and the world, linking producers and consumers across continents. But in recent years, trade volumes have slowed dramatically, disrupted by tariffs, geopolitical tensions, and fragile supply chains. The U.S. has imposed new restrictions on imports while facing retaliatory measures from other countries, creating an environment of uncertainty. When businesses cannot rely on stable trade flows, they cut back on production, investment, and hiring. This ripple effect weakens the entire economy, showing how closely interconnected global markets really are. Recent data makes the shift impossible to dismiss. Global shipping volumes have dropped, and major ports are reporting reduced activity compared to pre-pandemic levels. Supply chains remain vulnerable, as seen during the pandemic and again with conflicts affecting key trade routes. At the same time, emerging economies are beginning to bypass the US by building stronger ties with one another, such as through the BRICS alliance. This means American exporters face stiffer competition abroad, while importers pay more for critical goods. From automobiles to electronics, to everyday household items, trade disruptions translate into higher prices and fewer choices for consumers. For workers, the impact often shows up in layoffs within industries tied to exports, like agriculture, manufacturing, and shipping. History shows how dangerous collapsing trade can be. The Great Depression of the 1930s was worsened by trade wars that strangled global commerce and deepened economic pain. While today's world economy is more complex, the principle remains the same. When countries close themselves off, growth slows everywhere. The U.S. economy, heavily dependent on both imports and exports, is especially exposed. Declining trade reduces competitiveness, undermines innovation, and erodes the benefits of globalization that once fueled prosperity. The slowdown in global trade is not just about fewer cargo ships at sea. It's about the loss of opportunities for millions of workers and businesses who depend on an interconnected economy. The more trade contracts, the harder it becomes for the U.S. to sustain growth, making this slowdown a structural challenge, not just a temporary setback. Number 9, political dysfunction. One of the most overlooked but powerful drivers of the slowdown is political dysfunction. An economy relies not just on money and markets, but on the stability of institutions and leadership. In the U.S., gridlock in Congress, bitter partisan fights, and short-term policy making have created an environment where critical issues remain unresolved. From failing to pass budgets on time to endless debates about raising the debt ceiling, these standoffs inject uncertainty into the economy. Businesses delay investment decisions, financial markets grow jittery, and households lose confidence when they see leaders more focused on political point scoring than solving real problems. Political dysfunction isn't just frustrating, it has real economic costs that deepen the slowdown. The evidence is everywhere. Government shutdowns, even brief ones, have disrupted services, delayed paychecks for federal workers, and reduced consumer spending. Battles over infrastructure spending, healthcare, and taxation create a stop-start approach to policy, leaving companies unsure about future regulations and costs. Internationally, inconsistent foreign policy decisions weaken alliances and reduce the U.S.'s ability to shape global trade rules, further undermining economic stability. Investors, both at home and abroad, crave certainty. When the political system looks chaotic, they pull back, contributing to slower growth. What's worse, long-term challenges like climate change, healthcare reform, and inequality remain unaddressed, ensuring that the structural weaknesses in the economy only get worse over time. History shows that economic strength and political stability go hand in hand. During periods of effective governance, such as the post-World War II era, the U.S. experienced rapid growth fueled by bold investments and clear policies. Today, the opposite dynamic is in play. Leaders are locked in ideological battles that prevent compromise and hinder progress. This dysfunction feeds public frustration, erodes trust in institutions, and fuels polarization, all of which further weaken the economy. For the average American, the impact is felt through delayed projects, higher costs, and a sense of instability about the future. Political dysfunction isn't an abstract problem confined to Washington. It is a direct factor dragging down growth, leaving the country less able to navigate the challenges of a changing global economy. The slowdown, in many ways, is being manufactured in the halls of power. Number 10. Rising inequality. Perhaps the most defining feature of the current slowdown is rising inequality. Over the past 4 decades, wealth and income have flowed upward, concentrating in the hands of the top 10% while leaving the majority of Americans struggling. The middle class, once the backbone of the U.S. economy, has steadily eroded. When most of the gains go to a small group at the top, overall demand weakens because ordinary families who spend most of their income on goods and services cannot keep up. Economies thrive when prosperity is broadly shared, not when it's locked away. Rising inequality is not just a social problem. It's an economic time bomb that drags down growth and fuels instability. The statistics tell the story clearly. Real wages for most workers have been stagnant for decades, even as productivity and corporate profits soared. Meanwhile, costs for housing, health care, and education have risen dramatically, squeezing household budgets. The result is that families take on more debt to cover essentials, widening the gap between reality and the so-called American dream. The wealthy, in contrast, pour their resources into financial markets, driving asset bubbles rather than broad-based growth. This imbalance means the economy becomes more fragile, more dependent on speculation, and more vulnerable to shocks. Rising inequality doesn't just divide society, it undermines the very foundations of economic stability. History again provides a warning. The Great Depression was preceded by extreme inequality, as was the financial crisis of 2008. Both times, concentrated wealth fueled bubbles that eventually burst, leaving millions in hardship. Today, the U.S. is once again at that dangerous threshold. Rising inequality erodes trust in institutions, deepens political polarization, and stokes social unrest, all of which weigh heavily on growth. For ordinary Americans, inequality means fewer opportunities, stagnant wages, and a constant struggle to keep up with the rising cost of living. For the nation as a whole, it means an economy that is less dynamic, less resilient, and more prone to crisis. The slowdown we are experiencing now cannot be separated from this widening gap. Inequality is not a symptom of the slowdown. It is one of its primary causes, and unless it is addressed, the cycle of stagnation will only continue. The warning signs are no longer distant forecasts. They are here, shaping the economy we live in every single day. From the burden of rising household debt to the collapse of business investment, from declining global trade to unchecked inequality. Each of these forces is pushing us deeper into a slowdown that cannot be ignored. Richard Wolff's warning isn't about abstract theory. It's about connecting the dots. We see all around us stagnant wages, unstable prices, shrinking opportunities, and political leaders who seem more interested in denial than solutions. This slowdown is not just a matter of numbers on a chart. It touches the lives of millions of families trying to make rent, workers uncertain about their jobs, young people carrying student loans into an uncertain future. History has shown that when empires and economies deny their own weaknesses, the fall becomes harsher and harder to recover from. The United States now faces that same test. But within these warnings lies a chance to act. Recognizing the reality of the slowdown is the first step toward preparing for it. Whether that means rethinking our economic system, pushing for policies that address inequality, or simply understanding how these forces will affect our daily lives. The bigger question is not whether the slowdown is here. It is. The real question is how we, as individuals and as a society, will respond to it.